Hi, everyone. My name is Luna. I'm calling from the San Francisco Bay Area with Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers, and I am the Mission Educator Promoter here to share with you the story of Father Dennis Moorman. Father Dennis.
Hi, Luna. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you all.
So great to have you. Thanks so much for being here today. So today we will be reflecting on Father Dennis's story and how this has been really a beautiful way of reflecting on the image of the shepherd. So the image of the shepherd that Jesus uses may not be what we think it is. Shepherds were not considered to be honorable, and their basic task was to protect the sheep. When Jesus invites us to do what he did, we are called to have our feet on the ground and at the margins, and to let go of status. And as Pope Francis reminds us, we need to take on the smell of the sheep. And wow, Father Dennis, you have definitely taken on the smell of the sheep. Can you please talk to us about your experience and specifically your work with the LGBTQ plus community and how that has transformed you in your ministry?
Sure, Luna. Thank you for inviting me to share with you my experiences. I guess I should say I'm a Maryknoll priest who first came to Brazil in 1994 as a seminarian. And I was working with the Maryknoll Brazil mission community, and it was an experience to kind of get my feet wet in mission. And as I was leaving that 2.5-year experience, I had an exit interview with the bishop. And one of the things I said to the bishop, I said, you know, one thing I'm really impressed about with the church in Brazil is their commitment to the excluded and the marginalized of society. But I say, you know, in the area where I've worked, I see a lot of exclusion and really violence against the LGBTQ community. And I don't really see the church having a presence or doing anything about that. So I said, if I were to come back as a priest, I would be interested in doing some sort of ministry like that. Would you be interested? And he said, yes, if you feel that you have that gift, it's very important. And so I came back, long story short, a couple of years later, and I reminded the bishop of our exit interview. And he said, fine. He said, I just don't want you to make any public scandals. In other words, he said, just focus on being a presence of God's love. And he said, don't even get into the morality conversation. He said, that's very complicated. He said, just be a presence of God's love. So it's interesting, when my assignment came out as a priest, all the other assignments were assigned, all the other priests were assigned to this parish, that parish. And he said, Father Dennis Moorman is assigned, he didn't say to the LGBTQ community, but he said to the marginalized populations of the city. So I thought that was the best he could do at the time. That was like 20, almost 25 years ago. So I took that as an affirmation, you know, a big affirmation from his part of the work that I was doing. So I started just kind of reaching out and trying to get to know a little bit of the subculture. And so that meant frequenting the gay bars in the city. And that was usually very late at night, opened up after midnight. I usually took another missioner with me, so I couldn't be accused of being there for some other reason, and just started getting to know folks. And eventually, I think I became accepted and known. After some years, it took a while to build up trust with a religious figure. The people usually, you know, the LGBTQ community usually found condemnation and judgment. So, and also a lot of times they would get together of state meetings of everybody in the state to come together and talk about issues. And one time after like 2 or 3 years, they invited me to give a presentation or a workshop on homosexuality in the church. And I said, are you sure you want this this workshop? You may not like what the church, their vision on this. I said, maybe something like sexuality and spirituality. They said, no, we want to hear. So anyway, I ended up giving this workshop on homosexuality in the church. But one of the topics I thought was very important was actually something broader, was sexuality and spirituality. Because really, if you think about it, our sexuality is that kind of mystery gift from God, the mysterious gift from God that calls us into relationship with other people, that draws us in to love and to be loved with other people. And that's really the same energy of spirituality, if you think of it. Our spirituality and sexuality really are like one. So I tried to, because what happened in the LGBTQ community, oftentimes people will cut off their sexuality, totally deny it in order to live out their spirituality, or they will cut off their spirituality in order to embrace their sexuality. So I was trying to encourage a healthy embracing and integration of the two. And, I was pretty good about trying to keep a low profile and not doing a lot of speaking out, until there was a moment when one of the young people, Mauro was his name, was very brutally killed. Might want to put a little trigger warning here, because there is some violence. If it sounds like it's too much for you to listen to, you can shut this off at this moment. But there is a very high rate in the northeast of Brazil, and it continues into this day. One of the highest rates of violent crimes against LGBTQ community in Brazil. Just the latest statistic in 2020, there were 237 reported violent deaths. And out of those, 224 were murders, homicides, and 13 were suicides. And this is just the amount that is reported. There are probably many, many more that are not reported. And all of that total for Brazil, over half of those are in the northeast of Brazil, where I was working. So anyway, we were having a big state meeting of the LGBTQ community around human rights, on the issue of human rights. And Mauro, who was usually always there, he did not show up. And we were wondering what happened. Well, on Sunday early morning, his body was found in the streets of the city, and he had been very violently killed. And one of the things that whoever killed him, carved a cross in his thorax and carved crosses all over his body. And this was very, very troubling. I mean, not only the violence, but the idea that someone would carve crosses, almost to say, like, this is some kind of a religious thing, or this is a condemnation, a religious condemnation of you and who you are. And at that point, I said, I don't think I can keep a low profile anymore. As a public religious person, I have to speak out about this very loud and clearly. So I wrote, first of all, we had a memorial service with Mauro and his family and friends. And I also spoke and I wrote in the diocesan paper, and started becoming more public. And one of the things I felt it was important to speak to was this cross, and I said, this cross we cannot see this as a condemnation or judgment from religious people. But this cross is a sign that Jesus continues suffering today in the bodies of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered people, and suffering in solidarity with them. Just as he was nailed to the cross, they're being nailed to the cross and suffering. And the real message is hope, that there will be new life, that God will raise them up, just as Jesus was raised from the dead. And sure enough, sometime after this, what happened in the community is a lot of the community came together and really made a solidarity, a political action. And they changed the police, because a lot of times when people would go to report homophobic crimes to the police themselves would abuse them. And so they created this agency in the police, special office, where people could go to report crimes of violence against them as LGBTQ people, and that they would be welcomed in a safe place and respected. So I guess I did learn so much, first of all, solidarity, the importance of solidarity, the importance of presence with people who are excluded, and just how we exclude by our judgments. When Jesus says, "Don't judge or you will be judged," that's very strong to me. How often do we exclude other people when we make a judgment? And I think how God, if you look at God's creation, how God must really love diversity. God created so many different kinds of creatures, so many different kinds of plants. Just look at the insects. How many different kinds of insects? God must really love diversity. Why can't we accept the diversity that is within us as human beings? And probably the highest value of all is, we believe as Christians that God is love, and that love and compassion for ourselves, for one another, and especially for people who are different than ourselves. And another part of the resurrection is, I realized after this experience, when I returned to the US to work in vocation ministry, how some of these violent events had affected me, the trauma that I witnessed. So I began studying trauma healing and doing therapy for myself. And now, for the last 10 years, I've been involved with trauma healing therapy throughout the world. And so in some ways, Maru's death has been a gift to ministry, where I've been able to reach out to so many other people that are suffering trauma, that are excluded in so many different ways. So I'm grateful to Maru for the sacrifice he gave his life, and for the witness, that the LGBTQ community has been to me as far as solidarity and God's love.
Amen. And what a very powerful story. And one thing that I took away from this too is you said that you became accepted in the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
You use that word accepted, and I think about how that also is reciprocated in the LGBTQ community, how they want to be accepted too.
Yeah. It's interesting. They would have like fundraising events. A lot of times they would do a drag show. And then I would always go, and they would usually point me out. They say, "Oh, we're very happy to have Father Dennis here," and everybody would clap. And so it made me feel good, that it's like, I felt like, they have accepted me as their pastor of sorts.
Beautiful. And just to conclude this time together, is there anything you want to say to anyone who is part of the LGBTQ community, and just any words that you would like to share with them right now who are watching?
Yeah, I would just say, the importance of self-love and self-compassion, because there's so many voices from society that want to judge, and the diversity that's within ourselves, as mysterious creatures, human beings, that God created in our uniqueness. And just if we can embrace that and share that with the world, we each have a unique gift that we bring to the world, and our gender identity, our sexual orientation, however that falls on the spectrum, is really God's gift for the world. And when we're able to embrace that, we can also be sacrament of God's love to the world.
Amen. And so I just want to thank you again, Father Dennis, and blessings on your ministry. And we'll keep you in prayer. And I hope that you can keep us here in the United States in prayer. And just wishing you all who are watching this video have a wonderful Easter, safe and loving Easter. And we hope to see you again another time.
Thank you, Luna. God's blessing on everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation.